All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something, well, it's pretty intense. It's a psychological framework from a text called The Art of Female Obsession. We're going to unpack its core ideas, the step-by-step laws it lays out, and maybe most importantly, the really serious warnings that come with it. You see, the source material kicks things off with a premise that's, well, it's designed to be unsettling, and it really sets the tone for everything we're about to get into.
So, yeah, that's the opening shot right there. Seduction is psychological warfare. I mean, that one line tells you everything you need to know about the perspective we're dealing with. Right out of the gate, this isn't about romance. It's not about connection. The source material frames this whole thing as a calculated, strategic game. A conflict, really. A battle of influence fought inside someone's head. So forget hearts and flowers. According to this text, it's all about knowing which psychological levers to pull. And that idea, that's the foundation for this entire, well, let's call it a system.
Okay, so Section 1, the modern man's crisis. And the subtitle says it all, a failure to understand psychology. So where does the author even start with this whole argument? Well, it begins by diagnosing what it calls a crisis. The text basically says that a lot of modern men are failing at seduction, but not for the reasons you might think. Not because of looks or money or bad intentions. No, the source claims it's because of a fundamental, almost total ignorance of female psychology. The idea is that if you don't understand this inner world, you're just doomed to be ignored, or worse, forgotten.
And this is where the source really lays out its core argument. It sets up this huge conflict. On one side, you've got what it calls the modern male illusion. You know the stuff. Be honest, be predictable, give gifts, seek validation. The text basically says that whole playbook is not just wrong, it's actively working against you. And then on the other side, you have what it calls the path to obsession. And look at these words: mystery, uncertainty, tension, emotional pull. They're the literal opposites, right? The author's whole point is that the typical dating advice is flawed because it's all logical. But obsession, well, that's born somewhere else entirely.
Okay, moving on. Section 2, the rules of obsession. And the subtitle here is key, moving from logic to emotion. So after basically throwing out the entire logical approach to dating, the text pivots. The whole focus now shifts to this emotional realm. This is really where the book stops diagnosing the problem and starts prescribing the solution, or at least its version of a solution. It's laying the foundation for the specific rules we're about to get into.
So what is this emotional realm? Well, it's the absolute core of this entire philosophy. The text argues that male psychology is often, logical and direct. But female psychology, it claims, is totally different. It's layered, it's shifting, it's even paradoxical. The author says it's a world that craves intensity, excitement, and even the thrill of uncertainty, a place where logic just doesn't work. The argument is, if you want to create obsession, you have to stop talking logic and start speaking the language of this complex, kind of contradictory emotional landscape.
All right, Section 3, 4 Laws of Power. The subtitle, Establishing Respect and Influence. So now we're getting into the real nuts and bolts of the text. It presents these laws of obsession in 2 sets. This first set of 4 is all about one thing: building a foundation. It's about establishing psychological power and influence before you do anything else.
Okay, law number 1. And this one is a doozy. It's better to be feared than loved. I mean, it even quotes Machiavelli. Now, the text is quick to say this doesn't mean being a cruel person. It's about having an edge, a kind of intensity that makes you unforgettable and commands respect, not just comfort. It points to Napoleon and Josephine, saying her obsession came from his power and his unpredictability, not just his love. But here's the first huge red flag, the first big warning. The source says this is a razor's edge. If you push it too far, that respect turns into actual fear, and you've destroyed everything. It's all about a very, very dangerous balance.
Law number 2 switches gears a bit. Instead of projecting power, it's about gaining it through understanding. The idea is simple. Avoid flattery, seek wise counsel. The text says empty compliments are cheap, and they make people distrust you. The real power, it claims, comes from becoming a wise counsel. It uses Casanova as the big example, saying he wasn't successful because he was smooth with compliments. He was successful because he would actually study women, figure out what they truly wanted, and make them feel deeply understood. That creates a bond that's way more powerful than just flattery. But again, there's a huge warning. It has to feel real. If she ever suspects you're just using this as a tactic, that you're faking it, the whole thing just falls apart.
Now, law number 3. This one is all about managing perception. Appear virtuous, act strategically. The argument here is that for obsession to even begin, she has to believe that you are, on some level, good for her.
So the text advises you to create this halo effect. You present yourself as this virtuous, honorable person who perfectly matches her ideals. It's this appearance of virtue that gets you to trust you and let her guard down. And honestly, this is where it gets ethically really murky. Because the source is very clear that this is an appearance, and the warning attached to this one is maybe the most severe yet. If that mask ever slips, if she realizes it was all a fake, a manipulation, the obsession doesn't just go away. It turns into pure resentment, like hatred.
And that brings us to Law 4, which really drives home just how charged this whole framework is. Exploit the moment of weakness. The law identifies this moment of psychological opportunity when someone is vulnerable. They're feeling lonely or hurt or lost. The text says that if you can be there in that moment with strength and presence, you become unforgettable. But look at that word, exploit. It's so loaded, and the source seems to know it. The warning here is crystal clear. If you use that moment just to get what you want and then discard her, you will cause profound, deep harm. The obsession that's born in that kind of weakness is powerful for sure, but it's also super fragile and, let's be honest, ethically just way over the line.
Okay, so let's get into the next part. Section 4, the 4 laws of desire. Subtitle, Fueling Longing and Imagination. So if those first 4 laws were all about building the foundation, power and influence, this next set is about actually lighting the fire. These are supposed to be the tools for actively creating desire, for fueling that longing, and for getting inside someone's head.
So law number 5 is all about delaying satisfaction. Think of it like this. The text argues that if you give someone everything they want right away, all your attention, all your affection, there's no chase. And without the chase, there's no obsession. So it tells you to pace things, to delay gratification. Again, it brings up Josephine and Napoleon, saying her elusiveness is what drove him crazy and made him want her more. The whole idea is to create this push-pull rhythm of warmth and then space. But, of course, there's a warning. This isn't about being a jerk or just ignoring someone. If you pull away for too long, they're not going to chase you, they're just going to leave. It has to be a rhythm, not a complete shutdown.
And Law 6 builds right on top of that. Keep people in suspense. The source is super blunt about this one. It basically says, predictable is boring, and boring kills attraction. Game over. So to create obsession, you have to be unpredictable. Don't show all your cards at once. Be a little mysterious. Break routines. The point is to keep her guessing, to keep her mind working, trying to figure you out. But again, and you're sensing a theme here, there's a huge warning. There's a world of difference between creating a fun sense of mystery and creating manipulative suspense that just makes someone feel insecure and anxious. One makes them curious, the other just makes them resent you.
Okay, Law 7, mirror their desires. This one is a really deep psychological technique. The core idea is that we don't really fall in love with another person. We fall in love with an idealized version of ourselves that we see in them. So this law says you should figure out what a person truly desires, what they feel is missing in their own life. Is it adventure, stability, passion? And then you become the embodiment of that thing. You literally become their fantasy, their missing piece. It sounds powerful, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The warning here is that you can't lose yourself. If you just become a hollow mirror, you lose all that strength and mystery from the other laws. So you have to reflect her, but somehow still be you.
And the last law, number 8, is about becoming a storyteller. Create the illusion of destiny. The text claims that the absolute deepest obsessions happen when the connection feels fated, like it was meant to be. So this law advises you to actively build that story. You frame little coincidences as signs from the universe. You make it seem like your meeting was inevitable. You're basically turning a simple connection into this grand, epic romance. But, and this is the final warning in the laws, you have to remember you are building an illusion. And illusions break. If this whole destiny story isn't built on at least some real connection, it will shatter eventually. And when it does, the crash is going to be brutal.
Okay, Section 5, the final brutal warning. Subtitle, the double-edged sword of obsession. So after walking you through this whole 8-step psychological recipe, from building power all the way to creating a sense of destiny, the book doesn't end with a pat on the back. Not at all. It ends with the most serious warnings in the entire text. It basically turns to you and says, okay, now let's talk about the monster you've just created, framing it as this incredibly unstable, incredibly dangerous force.
And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? Obsession is fire. It can warm or it can burn. This one metaphor is the whole cautionary tale in a nutshell. Sure, fire can be warmth, passion, energy, all good things. But fire is also, by its very nature, uncontrollable. It can jump the fire break. It can get way bigger than you ever intended, and it can turn from something that warms you into something that destroys everything in its path, including, the book says, the person who started it. The message is clear. What you've built isn't a house, it's a bomb.
So let's just look at all 8 of these steps together for a second. Balance fear and love, understand, don't flatter, appear virtuous, delay satisfaction, all the way down to create destiny. When you see them all laid out like this, it's impossible to ignore what it is. This is not a list of friendly dating tips. This is a blueprint. It's a calculated psychological campaign. You start with power, you move to emotion, and you finish by writing a story. It's a recipe, plain and simple. And the text itself warns you over and over again that what you're cooking up is incredibly potent and maybe even poisonous.
And so, this is where we land, with this final, really unsettling question. The source lays out a path to gaining a kind of emotional power that most people can't even imagine. But with every single step, it screams warnings about the cost. It warns about causing real harm, about how easily this whole thing can fall apart, about the fire getting out of control. So the real question isn't, can you do this, or does this work? The real question is, what is the psychological price tag on this? For the person who becomes obsessed, sure, but also for the person who pulls the strings.